So if you want to become a successful electronic music producer, release on your favorite labels, and make music you love, you need to be managing your time like a professional. So here are 10 time management principles that every electronic music producer needs to know. Before I dive in, if you're a newer producer or you've been producing for a while and you're just feeling stuck, I'd highly recommend checking out our free video training where we go through the 5 steps that you can take and become a more confident and creative music producer. So the first principle here that I want to go over is what I like to call 1 hour, 6 days a week is better than 6 hours, 1 day a week. In other words, it's better to work on music regularly rather than cramming all of your time in one session on a Saturday, which is unfortunately what a lot of electronic music producers tend to do. As you can see here, there's no music being made in the week on this person's schedule. They just have a 4-hour session from 4 to 8 p.m. on a Saturday, kind of very unintentional. They probably haven't even scheduled it in the calendar because that's when they think the only time they have to make music is. But a professional producer who manages their time well actually works on music regularly throughout the week, even if they've got a day job, even if they've got other commitments. They find time and they work on music regularly. And there's a few good reasons why this works well and why you'll actually become a better electronic music producer as a result. You actually build more momentum because you're working on music regularly enough so that the next day feeds back from the day before and the day before that. So you're constantly tweaking and learning new things. If you're just doing a huge session on a Saturday or on a Friday night or whenever you find time, you won't have things fresh in your mind. It's been a week since you've last worked on music, and that's not a good thing. So once a week isn't enough. You need to be building momentum. You also, progressively learn from mistakes. If you figured out yesterday that, hey, maybe high passing every sound isn't a good idea, next session, you'll go in fresh with that in your mind and you won't deliberately high pass things as aggressively. You'll pull it back and you'll test that out. And then you can find a nice balance the day after that. Maybe you need to go the other way. And that goes for any production skill. It goes for synthesis. If you're making sounds regularly, you're going to become a better sound designer. And ultimately, this all comes back to behaving like a professional. Professionals don't work on music once a week. They work on it consistently. And even if you're not a professional yet, you need to act like one. The second thing you need to do is remove distractions. Now, distractions are so prevalent in our modern day with technology, which helps us make music really efficiently and creatively. It also comes with these downsides that mean we are using the same tool that we used to make bangers that we are going to play out in the clubs. The same tools being used to check Facebook, watch Netflix, use Instagram, get notifications from our friends, things that are going to interrupt the flow state that we're in while we're making music. And I think this comes back to the fact that more time is not always the answer, because we always think, if only I had 3 hours every day to make music. And while that's optimal, it's not the reality for most people out there. Unless you're already a professional electronic music producer making a part or full-time living, you're just not going to be in that position. Most of the time, what it's about is making the most of the time you've already got. In fact, if more producers did this, I think you'd see a skyrocket in productivity and creativity. So there's a few ideas here that I like to use personally. The most obvious one is like closing the door. As you can see in the bottom left there, just telling people around you you're working on music now. A few helpful things can be turning off Wi-Fi, especially if you're not really needing the internet while you're making music. You've downloaded all your samples already. Blocking websites like Instagram on my phone. In fact, I actually put my phone in a completely different room sometimes so I don't get anything. I also have Do Not Disturb turned on the top corner there, so that helps too. The cool thing is if you're in the Apple ecosystem, when you turn it on one device, it turns it on all devices. So that's pretty handy. And as you can see, I turned it on my Mac there in the top right corner. Also, just quitting other applications, especially browsers like Safari or Chrome. Do not have them open while you're making music. In fact, I'd highly recommend, maybe besides Splice or something like that, having one application open, and that being your DAW, Ableton, FL, Logic, whatever it is for you. Now, there are external distractions, but we also have to talk about internal distractions, which are things that seem productive, that are actually music related, but may actually be taking us away from the most important thing, which is just working on music and finishing songs, right? If you're not finishing songs, you're not managing your time well. And so even things like going through samples on Splice, if for you that's a distraction, you need to remove that. If you're downloading and trying out new plugins that you don't yet know how to use, maybe remove them from your library, or at least put them somewhere where you're not just going to play with them all the time. Put your most used plugins that you already know how to use in a collection in Ableton, or in some sort of folder where you can just go to that and know where they are. If you're using hardware, which may apply to some of you out there, sometimes they're great tools for creativity, but often they become these rabbit holes we dive down where we're just tweaking and making cool sounds. Again, great for sound design sessions, something I'm going to cover later in this tutorial. But if you need to remove that, that's maybe something you need to do. And even YouTube videos, even watching channel videos on this channel, right? If you're watching too many tutorials and not backing that up with action and using that to finish tracks, then you need to probably stop, even take a break from watching our videos if you're not managing your time well and you're not making music enough, right? So there's two types of distractions there. The third thing you need to do is separate out track writing from production admin. There's so many things you need to keep on top of as a music producer, right? You need to keep your library up to date. You need to plug in, clean up, you need to get rid of old plugins. You need to organize new samples and presets and find them. You need to constantly have your library of inspiration updated. You need to update software. You need to bounce out project stems so you've got copies in case you remix them, or you need, backup copies in case the project corrupts. You've got to organize and arrange your project folders, from the ones you've completed to the ideas to the ones you're working on. There's so many things you need to do, and you can easily get caught up in these tasks when really the most important thing you can be doing is still finishing music, still working on songs, creating, progressing, and exporting full songs. So what I do is I have a session once a week. Perhaps it's on a Saturday, whenever works for you, where I do production admin. I'm deliberately not making music here. I'm actually just going through Ableton, cleaning things up. And this helps me just keep on top of things while still, the other 5 days a week, because I do 6 days normally, I'm actually working on music those other 5 days. And then I know if there's anything I need to do later in the week, I have this batched time where I can do it, right? Very important so that you're not getting bogged down. For you, if you prefer to do it at the beginning of the week, like here on a Monday morning, if you're doing a morning sessions instead of night sessions, that could be a good way to start your week. Be organized at the beginning of the week, and then the rest of the week, make music, right? This person has a later start on Saturday because they can sleep in, they don't have work. Another optional cool thing you can do as well here is actually add in a third type of session, which is a dedicated sound design session. If you're big into sound design and creating things from scratch, often this can be a rabbit hole in and of itself, like I mentioned with hardware synths. So having one session a week where you have the ability to let your creativity loose and just go crazy with sound design can be really fun and freeing as well. And that way you've still got 4 other sessions a week where you're using those sounds you create in the context of finishing tracks. So that might apply for certain genres of electronic music. Just wanted to mention that too. The fourth time management principle here though is what I call session bracketing. So session bracketing is simply the practice of before and after a production session having a ritual that you follow, right? And the reason it's good to have these rituals, a set of tasks you do before you start making music, before you close up for the session, before you close your laptop, it's a great way to build good music production habits, right? It's a good way to simply, whether it's cleaning up your project, color coding at the end, or whether it's starting off a project a certain way, closing all of the things to remove distractions, whatever it is, it builds habits because then you don't have to think about it, right? It's a repeatable ritual as you see at the end there. It also increases your focus. It makes you a more focused producer because you're doing a certain set of tasks that tell your brain, hey, now I'm making music, so now's the time to focus on this, right? And one really underrated thing, like I mentioned with the admin sessions, if you're doing certain tasks that are really easy to do, it means you don't have to waste so much time on those admin sessions fixing up, say, bad color coding in projects, or bad sample management, or stuff like that you could have easily fixed with 5 seconds at the beginning of a session. Is really helpful for that. So, a good example of a starter session bracket would be have a coffee, close the studio door, and load up your favorite template for a particular style you're making. Maybe you have different templates like I do in Ableton here. So loading up the correct template will start you off in the right session. And then you make music, you come up with a song idea maybe, or you're working on an existing song idea and you do some new things to it. At the end of the session, you color code it, as you can see on the left there, depending on what instrument fits into what character or type of group. So drums, same color, basses, same color, musical stuff, same color, effects, same color, however you like to do that. And then saving any presets or exporting samples of stuff that you might use in other projects. This is a game changer because I think it's super important to save production elements that you create or find that you want to reuse in other projects and put them somewhere in a folder, in a collection in Ableton if you're using that, because then when you start another song idea, you don't have to dig back through the project and find it. And then also, once you've done all that, you can close up Ableton and close your laptop, as you see in the bottom right. So pretty good to do, and it's just really helpful, right? Number 5 is to carve out longer sessions for creative play. And ideally having around 2 to 4 hours of time one day a week is optimal for what I call creative buffer. This is time, and you could pair this with a sound design session, but it doesn't have to be specifically sound design, where you can work on a song or come up with a few song ideas where your creativity can just be let loose without that time constraint, right? The reality is we're all making music with a lot of other commitments going on during the week, and having one session where we just don't have to worry about the external world, and I find, 3 to 4, 2 to 4 hours is that nice time period where we can just not worry about time constraints. It's really, really helpful and healthy for creativity too. Most people, it's going to work on the weekend. However, if you could do one night a week where you have a longer session, that can be really cool too. And obviously, the more often you do longer sessions, it's more ideal, but obviously not everyone can do this, as I mentioned. So very important to do, like on this calendar here, this person's starting at 7:30 every day from Monday to Friday, sound design session in there, production admin session in there. But then the Saturday session goes all the way to midday from 7:30, and they can just let loose, right? It's that half of a day where they're just like, this is my music time, no one interrupt me. I'm just being creative, right? And then you have the ability to actually make mistakes, make errors that you can go back and fix. You can try something completely wacky and then completely do a 180 on it and go back, right? This is what those sessions allow you to do, right? You can go in on the details of a song. You can learn a new skill that you may be bad at, or develop one you're good at even further. Whatever it is, these sessions are great to have once a week. So number 6 is to take one day off per week. I'm a huge fan of this, and it's not talked about because often in producer culture, everyone's just like, you need to grind to make it as a music producer, which I think is a quite unhealthy mindset actually, because people end up burning out in the long term. So I'm personally on Sundays take it one day off a week. I think it's just a nice time of the week to take off. It refreshes me. I'm not thinking deliberately about music, although ideas come to me, which is the counterintuitive part of taking the day off, right? And it just really helps me, my mind recover. It helps me come up with new ideas. It helps me reduce any ear fatigue, because obviously we've been making music 6 days a week at this point. Our ears finally get a break. We can go out into nature, hear things at a normal volume again. And it's also just because putting a habit in place now for when you are a successful music producer is going to be good for healthy balance, right? If you're making music 7 days a week, that means you're never having a break, maybe except for a holiday or something like that. And you need those breaks for a sustainable music career, right? So very important. So number 7 is to produce at your highest energy point in the day. This isn't something a lot of producers give thought to, but it is important because there's going to be producers who like to make music first thing in the morning. That's not the stereotype, but honestly, some people do have more energy in the morning just based on what's called their chronotype. It's a really interesting concept if you want to Google more about it. But some people are early birds. They'll wake up early before work and make music. Some people are night owls. They might make music from 7 till 8:30 every day, even on weekends. Some people, it'll be even later and even longer if they have the ability to do that, right? They might start at 9 or 10 p.m. and go to 1 or 2 in the morning, which sometimes is good. Sometimes it could be bad for sleep. I do think sleep is important. And then some people, what I like to call lunch break grinders. So maybe they're at work and they only get the opportunity, they're busy in the mornings or they're tired in the mornings, and at night it's too crazy. Maybe they've got kids or families, whatever. And so the only time they make music is actually on their lunch break at work. They take their laptop and headphones, simple setup, not having a full studio, and just work on music. And then maybe have that one session on a Saturday, that longer session at home where they can just go in. right? So that could be a very helpful strategy too, depending on your circumstances. And you have to test these out to see when your energy levels are at their highest, because it's going to be different for every single person. So don't fall for the stereotypes. Do what works for you, and you'll find if you do what works for you, it'll be easier to make music more often. So this is obvious, but number 8 is to schedule sessions in advance. You've seen throughout this video, I've been using a calendar for most of the examples, right? And it's important to put sessions in your calendar. If you don't use a calendar already, I'd highly recommend starting to use one. Even just your default Windows or Mac calendar is fine. But putting your sessions in around the work, around the things going on in your life can be really, really helpful, because it's going to become an issue, and you're never going to actually find time if you're not putting it in there, right? You're going to simply say no because I don't have a deliberate session. And I think having it at the same time every day where possible, maybe an exception here would be on the weekend or something like that, is a good idea, just because then 9 a.m., 7 p.m., 10 p.m., that's my music time. I'm starting it there, and I can see it in my calendar. I'm not going to schedule things there, right? And you don't want to double book as much as possible, as much as you can avoid it, right? So put it in your calendar if you're not already, and that way you'll always be able to work your schedule around it. So number 9 is know what you're saying no to. A huge part of being a successful electronic music producer, a professional one, is that you do have to make sacrifices. It does require sacrifice. It's not the kind of thing you can just do now and then if you're wanting to become serious about it. And it's something you need to dedicate large amounts of time to. It's like practicing an instrument. You can't just pick up the guitar once a week and hope to become a good guitarist. You need to be working on it daily. And it does mean saying no to other things. The best producers in the world who are constantly improving their skills, they're not like watching Netflix for 6 hours a day every day, right? They're not coming home and, just scrolling through Instagram. They're in the studio and they're making the most of the time that's given to them, right? So you do have to say no to other things. Sometimes this means completely eliminating something, which I think can be extremely beneficial. Other times it might just be reducing the amount of time you spend on something, right? So some classic examples here would be, maybe you've got some friends, they could be good friends, maybe they're average friends, in which case you probably should lose them anyway. But maybe you've got friends that you hang out with and they kind of distract you. Not that you should completely cut out friends. I think you actually need a healthy balance of having friends in your life if you're a producer. And I'd probably say that's the last thing you should cut out. But some people, they hang out with these toxic friends every single day, and it just takes away from their goals. So if that's you, maybe that's something you need to look at reducing or eliminating. Maybe it's other extracurricular, or if you're in uni or something like that, maybe it's extracurricular activities or sports, which are again good things, but maybe you just need to reduce the amount of time, because again, there is going to be sacrifice here. The other things, though, I would say that are probably just things that you could entirely eliminate or severely limit would be things like checking your phone, watching Netflix, these common things that really eat up so much time that we don't even really think about, right? And these are probably the most important ones, to cut out. So if you are looking for anywhere to find time, just cancel your Netflix subscription, delete Instagram off your phone. I prefer to go cold turkey on these things when I'm trying to focus, because otherwise, there's always going to be the chance for it to creep back in. So, honestly, like, cancel your Netflix subscription and spend that money on like a Splice subscription or something. I like to kind of like, the money I would spend here, I'm going to put into music now. So that's a really helpful thing to do. And then the last thing, number 10, is to review your production habits monthly. So this is a nice little thing you can get into just to see, is what I'm doing working, right? And there's a 4-question little survey you can ask yourself. First thing is, did I become a better producer this month? And why or why not? So this is important to ask because it's going to answer kind of all the other questions, or at least help with those answers. Because if you became a better producer, that's awesome. Something you're doing is working. Now, could you have become an even better producer? Maybe, and that's where you might start to optimize your timing, or adding a little bit more time to each session, or whatever it is. But if you didn't, honestly, it's going to be either the answer to 2, 3, or 4 will help you here. So it's important to ask from the outset, did I become better? Do I know how to program drums better? Do I know how to design synths better? Do I know how to select samples better? Do I know how to break out of the loop trap better? Important to ask, and be specific with how you became better. Number 2 is how many hours did I make music this month? And then do I want to do the more, same, or less hours, right? And it is important to ask that question too, because if you didn't become a good music producer this month, it might be because the hours were low. And in that case, you might need to do more. Maybe you became a better music producer, but you grinded way too hard and now you're exhausted. So maybe you actually need to strip back things to make the habit more sustainable. Very important to ask. Number 3, did I make the most of that time? So it's not just about more hours, as I mentioned earlier in this tutorial. It's about, did I make the most of that time? Was I distracted while making music? Was I focusing on finishing songs, or was I just doodling around with Serum? Right? Not always a bad thing, but if I'm doing that at the expense of developing the whole breadth of electronic music production skills, newsflash, it's not just one thing. You have to know so many skills to become a good producer. And then how can you use your time more effectively? Could I have removed more distractions? Could I delete some plugins? Could I, send music to a friend every week to keep me accountable for feedback? Huge shout out to our mastermind students who have bought our courses. They get feedback every month where they can send in their music. There's one tomorrow. Gonna be good. Number 4 is the time of day I'm making music working with my schedule. Now, I could be doing everything I can to make the most of the time I've got. I could be doing everything I can to increase the number of hours. But if I just feel like I'm just hitting this roadblock, it could be the time and energy of the day. Often people think that the only time they can make music is after work. But the reality is they're exhausted. They've spent all day looking at a screen, maybe if you've got an office job or a computer-facing job, and now they're going to come home and look at another computer. Maybe that's not the best way to go. Maybe it's better to actually work on music when you're fresh in the morning and then see how that goes for a month or at least a few weeks. Maybe trying the lunch break grind thing, whatever works for you. Maybe it's, you have a flexible work schedule and you can move things around. If that applies to you, then great. I'm fortunate to be in that position, so I can do that too. Whatever it is, try and adjust the time of day and maybe try something you haven't tried before if what you're doing is not currently working. And that, my friends, is 10 time management principles for electronic music producers. Again, if you are a newer producer or you are a producer who's been making music for a while, months or even years, and you're still feeling stuck, highly recommend checking out our free training video down below. Again, it's going to go over 5 steps you need to take in order to become a more confident, creative, and focused music producer that finishes music, that is growing in their skill set, and much more. So check that out. If you thought this was helpful, like it for the algorithm, subscribe if you want to be notified about more videos from myself and the team. And again, comment something below that I can cover on this channel. We'd love to hear what you think. But until next time, happy producing.